Hello, it's Mrs. Garrett, and I am going to teach you how to use your books so that you can be successful. Hopefully this will be something that you can use in other classes. So even though that your book is not the same as, say, your science textbook, a lot of this stuff is going to transfer and work in your science class, your math class, or whatever class you have either in 6th grade, 7th grade, or high school. So let's first start with the table of contents. Now, I am using my teacher book. It'll look a little bit different than your student book, but for the most part, it's the same. This is the table of contents, or TOC. The TOC is found at the front of your book, and it tells you the unit and chapter names and the page numbers you can find that stuff on. So just zooming in here, you can see here Unit 1 is Introduction to World Cultures and Geography. Unit 2 says the United States and Canada. If I flip the page, Unit 3 is Latin America. The Latin American unit includes Chapter 6 and Chapter 7, goes clear with Chapter 8 and Chapter 9. See if it goes to the next one. And then Unit 4, you're going to start talking about Europe and Russia and the independent republics and so on and so forth. So you can see that each unit has several chapters within it and can have quite a few pages in it. So I'm going to try to teach you how to use your table of contents so you don't have to flip through, 50, 70 pages just to find that one paragraph that you need. And really the table of contents and then later the index are probably going to be two very useful tools that you'll use, again, not just this year but in future years. So I actually have how to use your textbook worksheet uploaded to our website. It's on that first home page, and it's got everything that I'm getting ready to tell you on it. And one of the first things it talks about is the table of contents, and it gives you a scenario. It says that Tim, he wants to know where to find information about ancient Latin America. So what he's going to do is he's going to go to his table of contents instead of, doing one of these numbers where you hope and pray that you come across the information you need, and you might do this 25 times and still not have the result you want. But anyway, he's going to come here and he is going to look at the Latin America unit, which is Unit 3. And he's trying to find something dealing with ancient Latin America specifically. So if I zoom in here, it says Latin America, its land and history is Chapter 6. And it does talk about Latin America, its physical geography, so like the mountains, rivers, and such. Ancient Latin America, well, that sounds like what we need. And it says that it starts on page 160. And if I go to page 160, I can see on page 160, you can see I am on page 160, that it does in fact talk about ancient Latin America. And so instead of flipping through 30, 50, 60 pages, I can read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. So we've really started to narrow it down. Later I'll show you how to take these 7 pages and narrow it down to maybe a few paragraphs. But next, let's look at the World Atlas. So your textbook has a World Atlas at the front of your book, and it's going to be something that we use quite a bit. In fact, we'll probably need to bookmark part of your atlas with a post-it note. Probably the best page to mark will be page A4 and A5. You can see that they actually have an A here, which stands for Atlas. So this is your Atlas, page 4. And this is going to be the world map that we use quite a bit, though we will use other maps within the World Atlas. Now, back to the beginning of the World Atlas, you will see that it actually has its own little table of contents on page A1. And this little table of contents is going to be pretty handy for you because instead of flipping through 30-some maps, you can actually use this table of contents to narrow it down to the page or two that you actually need, and it will save you time versus doing, again, one of these little motions that I see kids do. And sometimes they get lucky because this is only 30 pages, but other times I just think, it would be a lot quicker if you just go to page A1 and look at the World Atlas table of contents. So Again, this is off of your online worksheet about how to read your textbook. And let's look at the scenario here. Let's pretend like you need to label the countries in Africa, and you are trying to figure out what page would work best for that. Well, you'd come to this World Atlas, and if I zoom in here, you see that there's a table of contents on page A1, and you're going to look for the word Africa. And you can follow along in your textbook and do this and make sure that you can do it in the future, because this is going to come in handy for you. And if you look here, we have Africa, and it's got a physical map. Now, physical maps are for landforms like mountains and rivers, but we're doing countries, so we want the political map, which says is on A31. And so we are now going to flip to A31. And if you look here, I'm on A31. It says right here at the top on the side that the title of this map is the Africa Political Map. And there I can see the countries very plainly. And that's the thing about political maps. The colors for each country stand out. They'll use colors like orange and purples and reds, or I guess if you have a really cool book, maybe you'd have like hot pink, but this one doesn't have that. And that way you can see each country's borders very easily. It'll also include usually major cities and capitals. It does have a legend on it, and most of these maps in the book do have legends because they're good maps. And so that way you can know if it's a national capital, and even tells you a little bit about population, though that's not something that's usually very typical of a political map. If I were doing mountains and rivers, I'd go right next door to A30, and it says right at the top that this is the Africa physical map. And you can see that this physical map looks a lot different than the political map, because the physical map uses shades of brown and green in order to show you what they call land elevation. If you look here, most of your physical maps do show you land elevation because they're showing you how high or how low land is. And so it's going to show you like these darker brown colors in this book are going to be for, say, mountains. Whereas the closer you get to this green color or tan color, you're going to have like lower land. Usually you find that next to coastlines, but not always. And it's a little harder to see the country borders. This one at least does have the country's borders on it, and it does have the country names on it, but just be aware that a lot of physical maps will not have the country borders or names on it, and a lot of physical maps will not have cities listed on it, including capital cities are usually absent. Physical maps do also have rivers typically on them, and this one does have rivers. You can see some of the rivers here, these blue squiggly lines, and then they are labeled in italics. See how it's slanted? That's italics, so that you can see the river names. Now, this book is really nice. The World Atlases are very good in this map, and so, for instance, you're always going to have a physical map that pops up first. Here's the Europe physical map on page A26. And then if I flip the page, I have the political map, which is on page A28, A29. And you can see here that it says it's a political map. And once in a while you actually have to use both maps when filling out worksheets. You might have to label both rivers and mountains and also capital cities. So you'll need to know which map you need to flip to in order to find those things easily, and the World Atlas is definitely the place to go to. Another thing I want to point out on your maps in this book is that country names are bold and all capitalized. If you look here, Ukraine, which is a country name, has capital letters. So the U is capitalized, the K is capitalized, the R is capitalized, and so forth. That's because that is a country. Cities, on the other hand, are written with the first letter capitalized, and then the letters following it are little. Same thing here. This is the capital. It's got a capital K, but since it's a city, not a country, it's got a little I, a little E, a little V. And it's going to be that way throughout your book. So like if I flip to a different map, like if I flip over here to, say, South America, which is on page A25, I can see that I have all my countries showing up really easily here because it's a political map. And I have Brazil, which is a country, written in all caps. It's dark bold, so it pops out. This is this green country here. That is Brazil. And then it's got your cities listed with capital letters, followed by smaller letters. Now it's got a square, and according to the legend down here, a square is a city that's got a big population. So this is not showing cities of, say, 5,000 people. Versus if I want its national capital, it's going to have a star with a circle around it. You just always have to look at the legends, because depending on the map and book you're looking at, the legend might vary. So usually capitals will have a star. In this case, a national capital, like say Washington, D.C., would have a star with a circle. Whereas secondary capitals, say like Jefferson City, would just be a star. So you always need to check out your legend. So make sure you check out your title first, then your legend, then match those colors and symbols on the map with the colors and symbols on the legend in order to better read your map and understand your map. So that's the World Atlas. And again, we're going to use the World Atlas quite a bit this year. Another thing I need to tell you about your World Atlas is that on A1, it actually has a legend for you that works for your World Atlas. So it tells you that if you see like these triangles that are dark, it's the highest mountain peak. Versus if you just see a white triangle, it's just a mountain peak. And so it tells you like what all those colors and symbols mean on the maps that follow. So we're going to go back and talk about how your chapters are all organized, how your book is laid out. And your book is first grouped together into units, which can be very large. They can be well over 50 pages. So you have your units. Here I'm looking at Unit 1, and it's on page 2. And it says the title is Introduction to World Cultures and Geography. It's got 2 chapters. Chapter 1 is Welcome to the World, and Chapter 2 is Geographer's World. So this unit is divided into 2 chapters. Other units might be divided into 4 chapters. You just have to look and see. So again, it's all about how are these units divided up, how can I narrow it down to a chapter, and how can I narrow that chapter down to a couple paragraphs so that I don't have to do one of these methods and just kind of hope and pray that I find what I need. Because this is not always the most effective way to do things. I know that sometimes we do this and we find our answers, but this is not the most effective way to get things done. So let's look here. Let's flip to a chapter. Again, mine is a little bit different than yours, but we should be able to go to the same pages together. So here I am on Chapter 2, The Geographer's World. Maybe my bookmark. It starts on page 32. Okay? And it is going to usually have like a yellow box on this first chapter page, and sometimes we actually answer the questions within that yellow box. So just be aware that sometimes we do those questions that have like, you have like diamonds by it. And so this is going to include sections. So a unit is divided into chapters, and the chapters are divided into sections. This one has 2 sections. Now it could, in the future, your chapter could have, 5 sections. It just depends. So section 1 is the 5 themes of geography, and section 2 is geographer's tools. So if I'm looking in chapter 2 and I'm really looking for something that deals with maybe something that deals with South America, this right here would tell me, hey, this is not the right place to look. This is dealing with the 5 themes of geography and geographer's tools, which would be like maps, globes, compass, that type of thing. So let's see what else this chapter holds for us. So chapter 2, let's look at the sections. If I flip to page 35, I can see my section title is the 5 themes of geography. And right here, it gives me the terms and names. These are like your keywords, your terms. These are going to be bold and black in this book. So they're going to pop out. So this is going to include the terms continent, absolute location, latitude, longitude, relative location, and migrate. You can see not only are they bold and black, but they actually are underlined too, so that's pretty handy. Your science books probably do something similar, though maybe they do them in a different color, or maybe they don't underline them, maybe they just bold them. You can see it really sticks out. So here's absolute location, one of the terms. Now, this is not elementary school, so you might actually have to read that paragraph to understand absolute location. It may not just follow that word. Now, if you're doing terms for me on a worksheet, generally we're going to find those definitions in the glossary, which is in the back of the book, and we'll talk about the glossary later. It'll just ensure that you actually get the full definition and not just a chunk of the definition. It'll help ensure that you get full points. So we'll get to the glossary later. So you can see that you have units. They're broken into chapters. Those chapters are broken into sections. And those sections have headings, which are red. So here's heading, it says location. Later there's another heading that says region, and there's other headings throughout this section. And then these headings also have subheadings. So if I go back here to location, I can see that location is in red, that's the heading. And then the subheadings are absolute location. And then if I go to page 37, it says relative location. So that tells me, hey, I'm looking at location. There are two types, absolute and relative. So if you know that you're in this chapter, if you know, hey, I know I'm in chapter 2, and you're trying to narrow it down and see if I can find like 1 or 2 paragraphs to read instead of pages to read, you might first skim the chapter looking at these headings and subheadings to see if you can narrow it down. So if I were looking for, say, something on latitude and longitude, let's say I know that I'm in, say, this chapter, chapter 2, and I think, you know what, I think it's part of the 5 themes of geography. So maybe I know I'm in section 1, and I'm on page 35 right now. Well, I might just start looking through these headings. I see it says the 5 themes. That doesn't sound like what I need. Here it says location. I do know latitude and longitude have something to do with location. So this is a kind of a red flag saying, hey, look here. Then it does say absolute location. It does say absolute location here. It says latitude here, longitude, and then relative location here. So obviously I have now thought, you know what, I probably can just read at least this little part here, this paragraph or 2, maybe even just this paragraph, and find my answer on latitude and longitude. And that way I don't have to, you know, read the 7 pages or whatever it is that this section is. And so this will kind of save me some time. So now that we've looked at how your book is divided up, your book does have some special features to help you better understand what you read. And so if you're a person who sometimes struggles with reading comprehension, or you struggle with note-taking, you might check out some of these tips in your book. Page 34, it actually has tips on how to read and take notes. And so you might read that page and get some good ideas. And you can find these at the beginning of the units. It has just tips on how to help you understand the information. So that's pretty nice that it has that in there, because I know I have several students who struggle with understanding what they read or understanding how to take good notes when they read. Also, each section generally starts with a date line. These are little stories that are kind of like if you were to snip out a piece of a historical magazine or newspaper. So you can see here that they say this is taking place in Germany in 1912, and it gives you just an interesting way to understand the information. And they call that the date line. So if you are following along with the online worksheet about how to read your textbook, we are now on page 2, talking about the section assessment. And we're looking at page 40. And each of the sections ends with a section assessment. Now, assessment is like a word for test, so a section test or quiz, if you will. And it's in a box that looks like this. It's got like this green color at the top, and within that green band, it's actually got your terms listed again. So it says you need to know continent, relative location, absolute location, migrate, latitude, and longitude, and that they are within this section, not within like the entire chapter. You just have to look at this section to find those terms. Again, we'll talk about the glossary and how you can find those term definitions a little easier. It's also got some questions you can answer here, and once in a while we do the section assessments or part of the section assessment in class. Your book also has these things called skill builders. You can see it says skill builder right here, and I am on page 41. And skill builders are kind of scattered throughout the book, and you can find them in the index, and I'll teach you how to use the index. And skill builders are really handy because they teach you how to do a skill. So if you get home and you don't remember how to do latitude and longitude, there might be a skill builder on it. And in fact, there is on page 41. And it would bring you through kind of like step by step how to do it. It's even got pictures here to help you out. And that way, maybe if you didn't have your notes and all you had was your textbook, you could review latitude and longitude maybe to get ready for, say, the latitude and longitude quiz. So you might check out the skill builders if you're struggling with an assignment at home. Of course, you can also email me. You can try calling me. Always leave a message either through email or through the phone, and that way I'll know to get back to you, and I'll know that you were trying to attempt whatever activity it is. It's always better to kind of give me a heads up. And of course, come see me after school or in the morning. That way we can get your problem figured out, before class. Because if you come in right as you walk into class and say, "Hey, Mrs. Garrett, I didn't get question 6, 10, and 15 because I didn't understand it," I'll probably be like, "Well, why didn't you come in this morning?" Or, "Why didn't you shoot me an email? Why didn't you leave me a message on my phone?" So make sure you try to get a hold of me. At least let me know you have something going on, because if you don't, I'm going to think that maybe you just forgot to do it. Or maybe that you didn't try very hard and you just skipped those. So definitely give me a heads up if you really are struggling. By the way, my email is dgarrett@macon.k12.mo.us, and that should just kind of pop right up to you when you type it in on your Gmail. So each of your chapters is going to end with a chapter assessment. And so again, assessment's like a test or a quiz. And here I'm looking at page 50 and 51. And you can see at the top it says the word assessment. So this is like a quiz or a test. And we sometimes answer questions from this. It might be a good way to check on your comprehension of the unit. Though I do have to say we do skip around a lot in this book. You'll probably do less skipping around when you do like an American history class versus a world history class. You also have these visual summaries. Again, it helps you with reading comprehension, and these visual summaries tell you what you should learn from each section. So this had this had 2 chapters. So it tells you what you've learned from each chapter. So this has chapter 1, the 5 themes of geography. Here's a quick summary with a picture about what you should have picked up, like the main points. And here is the second chapter, the geographer's tools. Here's a few things you should have learned, like the main key concepts. And here's a picture to go along with it. You cannot just read the visual summary and think you're going to get everything that you're going to need from this chapter. But it is a good way to kind of review, might help you with some reading comprehension. So those visual summaries do pop up at the end of the chapter. So we have already talked about the World Atlas at the front of the book, but there are atlases throughout the textbook, and these atlases can be found at the beginning of each unit. So again, at the beginning of the unit, not the beginning of the chapter. And these atlases and maps, if you will, go along with whatever unit it is that you're looking at. Again, I haven't said this, but an atlas is just a collection of maps, if you don't already know that. So your World Atlas is just a collection of maps about the world. Your unit atlas is a collection of maps about that specific unit. So this unit is about the United States and Canada. It says so right up here. It's Unit 2. And so these maps are only about the United States and Canada. And some of them are like the same thing as what was in the front. Like you had a physical map of North America at the front of your book. But you did not have a map about natural hazards of the United States and Canada in the front of your book in the World Atlas. If I flip the page to page 56, you did not have a population density map of the United States and Canada. And we'll talk about what that means here later on. You did not have the United States and Canada selected Native American people in the 1600s. Like you did not have that in the World Atlas at the front of the book. So these are maps special to this specific unit. In this case, it is the United States and Canada. So you have this unit atlas, and on these unit atlases they have geography skill builders, and actually geography skill builders can be found throughout the book, not just in the unit atlas. We use these geography skill builders a lot. They are found in a red box, and they do say geography skill builder in red. This specific one is on page 57, and it is one that would go along with these maps here on page 56 and 57. So the unit atlas, we do use it a lot, and they are very handy in order to understand information. And that's the great thing about maps. Maps, you can look at it for, 30 seconds and gain information that would take you several pages of reading to gather. So it just is a quick way to get information if you use a map. Now, at the beginning of each unit, after the unit atlas, you have what's called the data files. So the data files are pretty neat. This one is on page 58. And the data files can be kind of lengthy, like this one has several pages of it, okay? And this will go along with whatever unit you're on. Again, we are on the United States and Canada. So this one is dealing with the 50 states of the US and Canada. And you can see that it's got each of the states' flags here, the states' names along with the capital, the population, infant mortality. Infant mortality is like how many babies die at birth, the amount of doctors, population density, so is this a crowded place or are there not a lot of people living there, how much people make, how many people graduate, how large it is, so is the state big in size or is it small in size, okay? And then it even has like an outline of the states. And if you go to the one on like, say, Europe, it'll do it for the countries. It won't do every state in France. It won't do every, or should I say province. It won't do every state or province of each of those countries. It will just focus then on the countries of, say, Germany, France, United Kingdom, and so forth versus the states. But since we live in the U.S., they actually really broke it down. Now, I'm going to flip to a different data file to let you see it because I want you to see how it has the United States at the end of the data file itself. So this is a different data file. It is on page 146 and it is dealing with Latin America, so think South America, Central America, if you will. And same type of stuff at the top here, but it's looking at countries like Brazil and Colombia and Costa Rica, Cuba, and so forth, El Salvador, Guatemala. And if you flip it, there's more. And if I go to the very end, it actually has the United States. Now, the United States obviously is not part of Latin America, but they always put the United States in order to help you better understand kind of how that country compares to where we live. So that way you can compare the United States to say a country like Haiti. Now this stuff is slightly outdated. Your book was written back in like '04, but a lot of this still stands. The numbers may not quite be the same, but Haiti is still a much poorer country, still has fewer doctors, still has fewer people being able to read and write than, say, the United States. So if you look here, you can see the literacy rates, the amount of people that can read and write in Haiti. 45% of people in Haiti from 96 to 1988 were able to read and write. Whereas if you go down to the bottom, in the US, it's 97%. So it lets you compare that. Again, it might be a little different today because we're quite a ways from the 90s, but still Haiti has a very low literacy rate compared to the US even today. Okay, now we are flipping to the back of the book and looking at our reference materials, and you'll see that these will have, actually over here, these will have R's in front of their number, R standing for reference, and it says over here on page 756 that we are in the reference section. And for those that don't know, a reference section usually has guidelines to help you understand the material better, and it's got a skill builder handbook. So these are skills that it teaches you to use. It'll have like a step-by-step guide on how to do these skills. And so since I don't want to do, again, another one of these little flippy things, because sometimes that doesn't work, and I might just use my table of contents here on R1. And maybe I am trying to learn how to compare and contrast information better. So I'm going to look here in this table of contents on R1 on the Skill Builder Handbook, and I'm going to scan down. Here I am, comparing and contrasting R9. So I'm going to flip to R9. And here it is, comparing and contrasting. And you can see, again, it's going to give me a step-by-step on how to do it. And that way, if I need to compare and contrast something for my social studies class or maybe my science class, I'll be able to do that at home. Like if I'm stumped, I could maybe figure this out at home if I had my book. And of course, you could also ask your folks, or maybe you have an older sister or brother, or maybe you have access to the internet and you can Google like a YouTube video on how to do it. There's a lot of different tools. This is just one you might utilize. After that handbook, you have the glossary, and the glossary is a very important tool for us. Again, it's in the back of the book. It, of course, is going in alphabetical order. And you'll see that these pages are marked on the side with a red tab that says glossary. Be careful because there is an English glossary which just says glossary, and if you go behind that, there is a Spanish glossary, and most of my students will not need the Spanish glossary. If you do your work out of the Spanish glossary, you will not get points. In fact, you will get a late, because if you're writing out the Spanish glossary, I'm going to think that you're probably not understanding the things that you write. Now, if you are a Spanish-speaking student, we are probably going to have some different rules on that, but most of my students are not, so please pay attention and really think about what you're writing and what you're reading. So, anytime I have you write definitions out of the book, this is the place I want you to go. You go to the back of the book, use the glossary. That way you're getting a full definition. Okay? Sometimes kids struggle with getting full definitions. This is a way to ensure that. And that means you need to write the full definition. The authors have already whittled it down to kind of the bare bones. And so yes, some definitions might be a little longer than others, but none of them are too strenuous, and let's just be honest, it's not that hard to write down a couple sentences in order to earn a point. So if you ever find that you do run out of room to write a definition, feel free to write it on a separate piece of paper and just staple that piece of paper to the worksheet that I gave you. Now, I do like this glossary. It's got some really good functions to it. Like you can see that it actually has not only your definition, but it also has the page number you can go to get more information. Now that page number thing, that's not typical for a glossary. You might find that your science book does not do that in its glossary. You might find that your 10th grade history book does not do that. This is kind of unique. and it's really handy. So if I'm looking at Bantu migration and I read this definition and I don't quite get it, and I don't really think that I can picture this in my head, then I can go to 503. By the way, if you don't know, I'm on R24, and I'm looking at Bantu migration. It says to go to page 503, and I can get more information. And here I am on 503, and then here is quite a bit more information. It's got pictures, it's got a map, and I can read about Bantu migration, which is right there, underlined, it's bold, sticking out to me. And this should help me better understand it so that I can get a picture of this in my head. It might even help me complete any work that I have to do. If I still don't understand it, I can maybe ask the teacher for some, an explanation. I could look at my notes. I could look at my PowerPoint slides if my teacher has given me any. I could ask my folks, or simply just Google it. Go look at some YouTube videos. Go read a little article. Look at some Google images. It might help you better understand the information. Of course, if you're going to use a computer or a phone in class, please make sure that you ask before you do that so that you're following the electronics policy. So the glossary is going to be really handy, and all those bold, black, underlined words within your book will pop up here, except for people's names. I don't know why it's that way, but it is. You will not find people's names in here. So if you happen to see Christopher Columbus bold and underlined in your book, you will not find his name in the glossary, unfortunately. And that should be the only time that you can't find an underlined bold term back here in your glossary, is when it's a person's name. So I'm going to talk to you about how to figure out how to work that out, because you would think it'd be here in the glossary, but it's not. That's unfortunate. So after your glossary, in the very back of your book is the index. And the index is going to have a ton more words than your glossary. And that's because your glossary gives definitions, so it can't have as many words. Your index does not give definitions. It gives you the topic. So here we have, say, the topic of Amazon River, and then it gives you page numbers. Okay? And you have to go to those page numbers in order to get a definition or to understand the concept. But it's got a whole lot more to look at. By the way, this is starting on R53. There is only an English index, no Spanish index. They are marked with a red tab that says index, and it's in the back of the book. I use the index a lot. When I'm trying to find a topic in your book, usually the place I go is the index. Index tends to be the place I look first, unless it's a definition. If it's a definition, I go to the glossary. So earlier when we were in the glossary, I said you cannot find people's names in the glossary, even if they're bold and underlined. So let's take Christopher Columbus. Let's say you need to find information out about him. Well, you'd go to the index. Now, just like when you go to the library, they are going to do the last name first. So don't look up Christopher, look up Columbus. And if I scan here, I'm on R55. On R55, if I keep scanning down, I see Columbus, Christopher. He is on 204, 309, and there is a map on 311. So anytime you see an M in front of the number, it means there's a map on that page. So if I go to page 204 or 309 or 311, I'm going to find things on Christopher Columbus. So I went ahead and I flipped to 204, and sure enough, there's stuff on Christopher Columbus. And I may have to actually read the page in order to gain information about him. I might not just be able to read that one sentence or two in order to understand who Christopher Columbus was. And obviously this book does not go into great detail. So if I'm really doing a project, I'm probably going to need to go on the internet or check out books from the library to gain more information. The index gave me a page 311 as well. It said it was M311. Keep in mind there is no M section, you have to go to 311. And when you go to 311, if you look here, there is in fact a map. And it does say Columbus on it. So here I'm at the index again, and the index is going to give you a page number for a topic, maybe more than one page. Let's say that I am doing a project and my word is Chinampas. Chinampas, Chinampas. Okay, so I'm going to look at my index and look under C for Chinampas. On R55, I found the word Chinampas. It says if I look on 162 and I-163, I will find information about Chinampas. The I stands for illustration. Illustration is another word for picture. So I'd go to 162 and 163, I'd look at the pictures, I would read the information, and I'd be able to figure out what a Chinampa is. I actually went to page 163, and on 163, up here, it actually does have the picture of the Chinampas. That picture would be very helpful in me understanding what it actually is. You might also see like C's in front of numbers. So here's C99, here it says C368. Those are like charts or graphs, if you will, and that'll help you better understand the information if you go to those pages. So again, the letters in front of the page numbers don't mean there's a section labeled with that. It's telling you that if you go there, there's an illustration or a chart or a map. Alright, we are still in the index, and another thing people wonder about is sometimes they just can't find things. It's in there, but they just don't know how to actually find the information in the index. So let's pretend like we're going to study the Maya. That's M-A-Y-A, the Maya. And you are really trying to do a thing on Mayan temples. So again, Maya, M-A-Y-A. And you need to go to your index and find Maya. Why don't you pause the video and see if you can find something about Maya and their temples within your index. Pause it and see if you can give yourself a moment to do that. Now, if you are struggling to do this, it is probably because you got caught up in the map section. So if I look here in my index on R61, I can see I'm in the M section. The thing is, the M's have all the maps listed. So if I go down here, it says maps, and then indented, it's got Africa map. Here's the pages I go to. African slave trade map, Antarctica map. Back at the top, it just keeps going and going. These are all maps. And I turn the page, and we're still in maps. You might think that, hey, now I'm in the P's. I'm in Panama, in Peru. But you're not. You're in the M's, and it's giving you page numbers for maps of Peru. And so the maps just keep going, and there's a whole bunch of them. And that's usually where my kids get caught up. So if you're looking for Maya, you actually have to be on R62. You have to go through all those maps, and in the center column on R62, it does say Maya. It says Maya cities, Maya civilization, Maya in Guatemala, Mexico, religious beliefs, stone monuments, and there's temples, Maya temples. I can go to 211, or there's actually an illustration or picture on 224. If I go to those two pages, I can start getting information about temples, though I might actually have to get more information off the internet or out of library books. I did go on ahead and flip to 224, and there actually is an illustration or picture of a temple here, just like it said. And again, I might actually need to read several paragraphs versus just reading a sentence or two in order to gather the information I need. Sometimes students get the table of contents, which I'm showing here, which is at the front of the book, which shows you unit page numbers, and then breaks it down to like chapters and sections, and the index, which we just went over in the back of the book, mixed up. When you talk about we need a page number for a unit, when it says Sammy needs to know what page Unit 7 starts on. Or Paula needs to know where the South American unit starts. That's going to be kind of your giveaway that you are looking for something in the table of contents. And if you want to abbreviate that TOC, you can. The index, and here I am on R53 in the back of the book, it gives you a list of topics along with its page numbers that you can read, and that's the index. So if Robert is needing to know information about the, let's say you know something about Alexandria or Alexander the Great, he could go to the index and get that page number. However, if he's needing a definition, that's when you're going to go to that English glossary, which starts on R24. And that would give you the definitions of some words, not all the words in the book. Again, generally if they're underlined in bold, they're in the glossary, unless it's a person's name, in which case you actually need to flip to the very end and go to the index. So I hope that that helps you understand how to use textbooks and helps you be more efficient so that you don't have to do one of these hopeful flips. I hope it allows you to know what tools are available to you, so that way if you get stuck at home, maybe you can kind of figure it out. Maybe it'll help you not just in social studies this year, but in years to come, and maybe even in other classes, maybe even a college class one day. So I really do hope that that helps you understand how to be an efficient student and how to use your textbook as a tool, and not just as a big weight that you carry around from, 1 hour to the next.